Hello, I think we are ready to start. Thank you all for coming. We didn't anticipate so many people joining us tonight, but it's great to see so many people with us. My name is Joerg Geier, and I'm one of the co-founders and program chair here at the Arts and Nature Social Club, and we've got a few members with us as well who can identify themselves. Maybe raise your arms if you're regulars or members already. If you want to talk to us about Arts and Nature Social Club, please let us know. We are a non-profit that was started in 2019, and thanks to the generous support of Hotel de Rome, we are able to run a lot of our events from this venue. However, as grand as it may seem, we are a poor NGO, and hence, if you're grabbing a few drinks, please leave the money in the pot or make a donation later, because the ticket price does not cover drinks. We are a small NGO, and we are trying to keep these events going that are mostly interdisciplinary in nature, and our goal is to use the arts as a means to empathize with the topic of nature and sustainability, and we bring together the arts, science, and entrepreneurship with a sustainability angle to look at sustainability topics from various angles. And tonight, as you all know, we'll be looking at the plastic topic, rethinking consumption. The plastic topic is a great challenge. As we all know, there are scientists that have found out that plastic can now be found in human blood. It can be found in very remote places on this planet, and we'll be learning a bit more from the experts tonight what the challenges are, but also we want to greatly emphasize solutions. That's why we have quite a broad panel and speakers from different angles. Just a few words about the setup. Normally it's, let's say we have a stage and a few speakers, and this time we said we would do it a bit differently compared to the past. We called it a fishbowl, so we're all sitting in the center. We realized that we are with our backs to some of the people in the audience, but this is also an invitation for you to participate later in the open discussion. We left a chair empty, so if somebody feels called to comment, please, after the panel discussion, come to the stage, make a short comment, no more than 60 seconds, and once you've made your comment, please vacate the chair so that somebody else can make a comment as well. We'll have a short moderated discussion, and then we will involve the audience as much as possible. But now I'd like to briefly point out the speakers and also say a few words about our partners and sponsors. So first of all, Isa Willinger. She's a film director, and she shot the documentary Plastic Fantastic, and will be showing excerpts from the film. Again, it will focus on both challenges and solutions. Then we have various speakers from different areas. The first speaker following Isa will be Felix, and Felix works for a consultancy called Systemiq and is a plastics expert, so to speak, who knows the regulatory side and will be able to say a few things about the 101 of plastic, things some of you may know or not know. Then Karsten Hirsch, who traveled all the way from Cologne, will say a few words about his startup called Plastic Fischer. They collect river plastic from rivers in Southeast Asia, because 80% of the plastic that we find in oceans actually has its origin in river streams. And then last but not least, Anna will talk about community activities and community action. She founded an initiative that's called Litterpicker, and she will share with us what we can all do, even if we feel we cannot do much, but there's always a little we can do. And she will share some insights from her experience. And Fabian is my co-moderator and also board member of Arts and Nature Social Club, so both of us will be moderating. I'll say a bit more about some of our partners later, because some of you may be curious what they can do in order to deepen their insights into this topic. And we have some sponsors and closer partners as well. First of all, there's Fulbright Germany. I used to be a Fulbright student in the US and ESA as well. So Fulbright is graciously supporting us tonight. And we have TTI as well. Janice, where are you? She will say a few words in just a second about TTI, Top Tier Impact. And media partners are Haus von Eden. And then we have, of course, Hotel de Rome, which graciously hosts us tonight and other nights. So maybe a couple of minutes from Janice to share a bit more what TTI is about, and then we will start with Isa showing some excerpts from the film. Thank you. It's probably easier with a microphone.
Okay, yeah, that's better. My voice is not that loud. So Joerg and I are co-ambassadors of an organization called Top Tier Impact, TTI for short. It's a global network of entrepreneurs and founders and generally people in the ecosystem working on climate tech, impact, and everything that goes along with it. It's a members organization. We are building up the community here in Berlin, but we have people in chapters all over the world. And there's various things that are quite nice about being a member of TTI. So number one, you can connect directly with over 500 like-minded people in the space, whether you're an investor, a founder, or a researcher. Everything is basically part with a focus mostly on investors connecting with entrepreneurs. We have WhatsApp communities, we have in-person events in various cities and also online, sometimes with climate experts and on various topics, startup pitches, and also we host a lot of side events at all the big conferences, so Davos, COP, wherever you might be, there's probably a TTI member there that you can connect with. So yeah, and we're glad to be minor co-hosts with the Arts and Nature Social Club. Thank you.
So thank you, Janice. So we have many partners, and we also believe in a collaborative approach. So that's why we decided to bring in as many like-minded organizations this time, and later we'll share a bit more about Arts and Nature Social Club, because we're also a membership-based organization. But now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Isa Willinger, who will share some excerpts and tell us a bit more about her documentary, Plastic Fantastic.
All right, sorry about that. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Joerg, for inviting me and Plastic Fantastic to this amazing occasion here. I'm sorry that I'm turning my back to you guys, and I'll try to twist and turn so everybody gets a look onto my face sometimes. So this is my latest movie, Plastic Fantastic. It premiered last year at the film festival in Copenhagen, and since then it's been traveling the festival landscape from China to Georgia to Brazil recently, and I'm really super happy about that so many people all over the place are interested in this topic, obviously. And it is a truly global topic, as probably most of us know here. So it will also be broadcast in German public television, ZDF, at the end of the year. So you can get the whole movie there. And I'll start off showing you the trailer because it just gives a good overview of all the protagonists we have in the film and sort of the main aspects that are in the film. Oh yeah, and the people sitting next to the lamps, maybe could you find the switch? Apparently it's like on a cable by the lamp, and could you switch the lamps off? That would make it easier. Thank you. Thank you.
Plastics are pitched as this product that comes from nowhere and goes to nowhere.
Plastics are better than any other material. And when we think about stopping hunger across the world, plastic packaging will play a really critical role in doing that.
Wir sind eine wahnsinnig gut verdienende Industrie, aber das größte Problem nach wie vor ist für mich die Deponierung. Das hätte es so nicht geben sollen.
So, okay, let's eliminate plastic plates. That's not going to stop waste from going into the environment.
We breathe it in all the time, unfortunately. So it's in our organs, in our blood, yeah, everywhere.
This is the first industry that came into St. James. So many people have died with cancer. So many people are sick with cancer. And it's just like that, though, because if Formosa come here, we're not going to live.
Observers more or less expect between 3.5% and 4% annual growth rate for plastics when we're already seeing a crisis.
Jeder denkt sich, wenn ich den Kreislauf, also die verschleißten Schuhsohlen, Bremsbeläge, Autoreifen, die müssen so gemacht werden, dass sie den biologischen Systemen zurückgehen, dann gibt es keine Abfälle mehr, dann gibt es auch kein Plastikproblem.
Als Ausgangsprodukt nutzen wir Reststoffe der Getreideverarbeitung.
Ja, das ist grandios. Wir als Bürger mit unserem Konsum, wenn wir den weiterführen wie bisher, werden wir in wenigen Jahren unsere Lebensgrundlage für uns selber und für nachfolgende Generationen vernichten.
Also darum geht es nicht nur für oder gegen Werken, nein, es ist einfach dummes Plastik.
Plastic bomb has come today. Even though today, yesterday.
In jeder Auster sind etwa 1500 Plastikteile drin. Also wenn wir nur genügend Austern essen, dann können wir das Problem nämlich auch lösen. Dann kriegen wir das Plastik aus dem Meer wieder zurück.
All right. So, as you saw from the trailer, the film combines people from the plastics industry, namely 2 lobbyists, one from the American Chemistry Council and one from Plastics Europe in Germany, and several people from science and environmentalism that are sort of on the other side. And so the idea from the beginning was, first of all, to get those people on screen that are sort of invisible usually when we see TV reports on plastics, namely the industry people, because we only get to see environmentalists and scientists usually, but never the people who actually are behind the plastics crisis and who are producing the plastics. So my sort of biggest need was to get these people, and it was super hard to get them. We were declined by all the big plastic producers, all the petrochemical companies that are plastics producers. Usually they are combined because plastics is made from oil. And so finally I got a yes from the 2 lobbyists that are now in the film. It's super interesting to listen to the lobbyists over the course of the film because they have their own sort of narrative, and the German guy and the American guy, like some of the terminology they're using is totally similar. It's really like a sort of narrative they learned by heart how to present their business. And as we have like a 100-minute film here, we have some time to listen to them for a while, and the longer you listen to them, the more obvious their narrative becomes, and we're able to sort of, they sort of disassemble themselves over the course of the film, I would say. And what was unexpected for them, because usually they're used, if they receive a journalist, they are used that like 2 sentences will be in a TV report in the end, you know. They are not used of themselves getting so much screen time, and so they didn't really understand sort of the methods of documentary filmmaking, I think. And they were super at ease and like telling us stuff they maybe wouldn't have told us if they had known their big role they would have in the film. So just to give you a little bit of an impression of how my job is a little bit different from a television journalist, for example. Like we try to sort of get deep into the human side of things also. And not only treat them as informants, but really see also the ambivalence in them as human beings, you know, sort of try to look them in their eyes and get a feeling for them as human beings as they're telling us all these lies sometimes, you know, they're like overt lies sometimes. So I'm gonna I don't know what your sort of basic knowledge is on plastics, so I'm gonna just start out like pretty basic and just show you some scenes. Also that I was thinking that would be important for my audience to sort of see at the beginning of the film to get an understanding of the problem of plastics and the different aspects of that problem. So just to, this is Dr. Sarah Jean Royer. She's a scientist in Hawaii, and yeah, so we're gonna see a scene with her.
Wow, this is like, there's a lot going on here. It's what happened, like we come here this morning, we look at the beach and we are like, wow, this is beautiful. And then you start walking and you look at the sun and you're like, oh my God, what are all these colors? And they're actually microplastic. I'm just taking the very near surface, but keep in mind that if you dig, you'll find more of it. And the more it will dry, the more sun will go through it, and you see it's pretty much only microplastic at this stage.
So the problem we see here is that the problem of fragmentation, that microplastics or plastics, usually they don't decompose for centuries and centuries. So what happens, it's just like fragments into smaller and smaller pieces, and these pieces just enter the biosphere in every way, like they enter your body, the cells of your body. You said blood before, also placentas of babies, like even testicles, brain, everywhere. And so we see two problems there. First of all, the physical presence of these tiny particles are not good for the body. And the other part, and I think you will tell us about it more later on, is that there's a lot of additives in plastics, like chemicals, you name it, and hundreds of them. And they, of course, they also enter your body. So there are several problems attached to this problem of microplastics. But of course, that's not the only problem by far. So the next excerpt is going to be, I'm going to start out showing you one of the lobbyists, just to see what they are, how they are arguing. Give me a second here. So yeah, I'm going to start it. So this is the German one, but the next one is going to be the...
Auf der Welt liegen deponierte Kunststoffe, die gehören nicht in die Erde.
He's from Plastics Europe in Frankfurt.
Sondern sie landen in der Umwelt. Für mich völlig inakzeptabel. Es nutzt aber nichts, wenn wir im Jahr 2021 alles kritisieren, was in der Vergangenheit gemacht wurde. Wir müssen heute mit Lösungen umkommen.
Do you have an iPhone? Yeah. So, great story about this. You know, people forget how difficult it was to build the iPhone. And back in the 1990s, Apple created a product known as the Newton. Does anybody know what the Newton is? It was a massive failure. But without that failure and without those learnings, you would have never had the innovation that occurred. And so when we go back, my job is not to look backwards, it's to look forward. It's to look forward to what this generation of leaders in our industry is committed to doing. It's to look forward to the innovation that they're doing today to achieve these goals. I can understand that people might be skeptical that we have not done enough. And I empathize with those people. I understand that. In fact, our companies do too. But I think for us as an industry, we hear people loud and clear that waste in the environment is never acceptable. So, yes, you should have frustration at the lack of progress that has occurred in years past, but I would also ask your viewers to take a trust and verify approach. We are going to ask you to trust us, but at the same time, we would ask you to hold us accountable for the commitments we're making and the progress we're making, because it's going to be difficult, but we are on the right path to do it.
Sort of an attempt to visualize the industry, because it's very hard. Like, how do you visualize that?
Pitched as this product that comes from nowhere and goes to nowhere. It appears on a store shelf, and people have been told that as long as they put their plastics in the recycling bin, it's taken care of. And as we know, both of those could not be further from the truth. Prior to working on plastics, I had been working on climate and fossil fuel related issues. In particular, climate accountability, so what the major oil and gas companies knew about climate change and when, what Exxon and the American Petroleum Institute knew, back in the 50s and 60s. And that sort of led us to looking at the connections with plastic, because plastic is made from fossil fuels. And the plastics conversation had been, in many ways, a conversation about litter and marine debris. And we wanted to help widen the scope of the conversation to include the full life cycle of plastics and their fossil origins. By the time you have a piece of plastic, you've had to go through an oil well and all of the fuel consumption and methane emissions and venting and flaring that comes with that. You have to go through an extremely heat and power intense process to crack those molecules to make them suitable for plastic and then string them together. But it's not just a material supply chain, the companies are the same. It was something I knew generally, but looking at the specific connections, the fact that some of the major oil companies are the largest producers of plastic in the world, and the role that plastic plays in their corporate structure was a surprise to me.
She lives in Louisiana, and she's an activist also. She's living near where the big plastic corporations produce the chemicals that go into the making of the plastics, and there's a lot of pollution in her area. The cancer rate is extremely high, and she's trying to fight that another plastic plant, like one of the biggest ones in the world, is building a new facility in her town.
So they'll make the chemicals that's going to be used to make the plastics. That's what they're going to do. Look at all those tanks. Oh, let me tell them this. How you doing? Good, that's good. Been doing good. Tomorrow we have a meeting at Freetown Hall at 4:30.
Okay.
You think you can come?
Yeah.
I sent the message in the group text, and I also sent it to Carol.
Okay, yeah.
So if you can come.
Yeah, I know to go right.
Yeah, well, we're gonna see you tomorrow, we hope.
Okay, yeah.
All right. So let's see. All right. Thank you. Bye. Yeah, so many people have died with cancer. So many people are sick with cancer. A lady that was living here, she died with cancer. The lady that was back there, she had colon cancer. And a man in the brick house, he died of cancer. He was outside mowing his lawn and he fell to the ground. And a few months later, he died. Found out he had cancer. When I see those things coming up, I start getting angry inside. Once they get in here, they want to expand.
An attempt by
Plastics Europe Deutschland. Das ist der Verband der Kunst.
The plastics industry, they have the lobby group, Plastics Europe, they created this plastic case and they distributed it to schools, like elementary schools. And it's supposedly educate you about sort of chemistry and the wonderful material plastics, but in reality, it's really commercial. It's advertisement for plastics, and they already distributed, I think, like 20,000 of these cases to German elementary schools. So it's quite disturbing. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to show you everything. We're gonna go towards Do you know what happens in Germany with plastics? Since only a small amount can be recycled, so the rest of it, do you know what happens? It's burned, yeah. And then what happens with the rest? Because even if we burn something, there's always a rest, right? There's a leftover. So what happens to the leftovers? Does anybody know? No, not quite. I mean, we ship other plastics, like dirty plastics or plastics that we think might get recycled, but not the residues, not the dust from the filters. They are somewhere else, put somewhere else. I'm going to show you. I'm just going to try to find the right spot here.
Damit jeder weiß, wer alles als Besucher in der Probe ist. So.
Herr Schneider, was ist da drin?
In den Mixpacks ist jetzt der Filterstaub aus den Müllverbrennungsanlagen. Die Filterstäube sind sehr auch angereichert mit Schwermetallen, aber auch mit Dioxin und Furan. Also die entstehen bei der Verbrennung. Durch die hohen Temperaturen entstehen diese Stoffe. Bei der normalen Verbrennung, bei der Niedrigtemperaturverbrennung entstehen die nicht. Aber da ist Kunststoff ein wesentlicher Faktor für diese Entstehung der Dioxin und Furane.
Wie oft musst du eine Müllverbrennungsanlage diesen Filter ausleeren?
Bei den Bodenverbrennungsanlagen, da kommen so 3 bis 4 LKWs pro Tag, also ca. 100 Tonnen reiner Filterstaub an. Der Ausstoß an dem Filterstaub ist schon recht hoch. Dann werden die Resthohlräume mit Feinsalz verschleudert, dass wir eine komplette Anbindung ans Gebirge haben.
Und wieso werden die nicht über Tage gelagert?
Der Anteil der Schadstoffe, die in den Filterstäuben enthalten ist so hoch, dass sie eben auf einer übertägigen Deponie nicht mehr eingelagert werden können. Deswegen können sie eben nur hier in dem Salzgestein abgelagert werden.
Für die Ewigkeit?
Für die Ewigkeit.
Haben Sie noch genug Platz, um den Müll der nächsten Jahre hier auch zu bewahren?
Ja, wir haben zwar nur ausgewählte Grubenräume für den Bergversatz, aber die Dimensionen sind halt schon so groß, dass wir hier noch über einige Jahre Bergversatz betreiben können.
You're probably feeling pretty dystopian now. Let's see if there is any solutions inside. There's some, but it's tough, as you will learn from the other speakers here as well. All right.
Das hier ist unser Museum Zukunft, weil wir zeigen wollen, wie die Zukunft aussehen kann, wie wir 40 Jahre Umweltdiskussionen in Innovationen umsetzen können, wie Dinge gemacht werden, die nützlich sind und nicht weniger schädlich. Also insgesamt findet man hier in den Räumen etwa 400 Produkte, die so gemacht sind, dass sie in Kreisläufe zurückgehen können, also von der Wiege zur Wiege, Cradle to Cradle. Diese Schuhe sind die ersten Schuhe, die perfekt kompostierbar sind. Man kann alle Materialien so gestalten, dass sie kompostierbar sind, dass man zwischen Kompost werfen kann. Das ist besonders wichtig für die Sohlen, weil die Sohlen reiben sich ja ab und geben Mikroplastik in die Meere ab. Und wir geben im Durchschnitt als Menschen etwa 110 Gramm Mikroplastik jedes Jahr durch den Schuhabrieb ab. Diese Schuhe sind dafür gestaltet, dass ich den Kavalierstall an der Fußgängerampel nicht vermeiden muss. Denn alles Material, das sich abreibt, kann in biologische Systeme zurückgehen. Während normale Schuhe, teilweise aus PVC, wirklich gefährliches Mikroplastik liefern, was dann eben nicht in biologische Kreisläufe gehen kann, sondern im Meer endet. Aber das ist wichtig, weil Mikroplastik reichert sich in der Umwelt an und auch in unserem Körper. Und die Geier, die wir im Gehirn haben, führen bei Tieren zu Verhaltensänderungen, also zu psychischen Erkrankungen. Also mir ist es ein absolutes Rätsel. Wie kann jemand Schuhe herstellen und nicht fragen, was mit dem Abrieb los ist? Wie kann jemand überhaupt etwas herstellen, was verschleißt und nicht fragen, was damit passiert? Das ist mir ein Rätsel. Also ich meine...
Wie sollte dann das perfekte Mikroplastik sein, das uns dann nicht schadet?
Ach, eigentlich kennt jeder perfektes Mikroplastik. Das ist einfach ein Operationsfaden zum Beispiel, der sich selber auflöst im Körper. Da gehe ich auch gar nicht hin und operiere nochmal, um ihn wieder herauszunehmen, sondern er ist so gemacht, dass es sich biologisch im Körper abbaut. So muss Mikroplastik gestaltet sein. Ich habe mit meinen Studenten gemessen, was passiert, wenn man so eine Maske aufsetzt. Und wenn man diese trägt, dann atmet man eine Vielzahl von Mikroplastikteilchen ein. Die ist nie für uns hergestellt worden. Das liegt daran, dass man in China nie eine Umwelt- und Gesundheitsdiskussion hatte. Und dann werden Masken entwickelt, die perfekt biologisch abbaubar sind. Das ist eine Zellulosefaser, die auch gut für Hautkontakt ist. Und auch die Gummibänder dazu sind so gemacht, dass sie perfekt biologisch abbaubar sind.
Das ist Michael Braungart, der ist Chemiker in Hamburg. Der besucht jetzt Anne Lamp.
Reststoffe bei der Getreideverarbeitung entstehen. Also Abfälle von der Stärkeproduktion, Abfälle von der Bierproduktion zum Beispiel. Und dann gehen wir in unsere Anlage rein und raus kommt das. Das war so der Status vor 2 Jahren noch und ja, was wir jetzt haben, ist quasi das hier von der vorigen Projekt, das ist wirklich extrudiert, also plastisch.
Ja, das können wir zum Beispiel nehmen, zum Beispiel so Grableuchten vielleicht dann auf dem Friedhof oder sowas, weil das Zeug natürlich ja immer nachher den ganzen Kompost versorgt.
Aber schon an Urnen gehabt.
Ja, auf jeden Fall. Ja, klar. Also es gibt ja in der Nähe einen Hundefriedhof. Dazu für Haustiere überhaupt den Friedhof. Dazu da könnte man sich mit dem Betreiber in Verbindung setzen und ausprobieren.
Und was jetzt viele machen eine ganz dünne Schicht und sagen, wir haben schon was richtig nachher.
Ja, das ist ja umso schlimmer natürlich, weil dann kann man sie überhaupt nicht mehr dran.
Genau, ja. Deshalb ist das auch ein ganz starker Fokus von uns gerade, dass wir halt dann am Ende Pommes, Trays oder so.
Ja, das ist grandios. Kann man sich eigentlich für die einfach auch mal ein Kilo kaufen von dem Material?
Die Anlage läuft.
Zum Beispiel von Menschen, einfach die Fantasie anregen will, weißt du? Da musst du was in der Hand halten dafür.
Wir haben ja vor 2, 3 Jahren, vor 3, 4 Jahren angefangen zu forschen in dem Bereich. Wir hatten gar keine Mittel oder nur so ganz kleine Mittel und so ein Extruder war natürlich gar nicht drin. Ne? Und dann haben wir überlegt, wie können wir das irgendwie simulieren? Dann haben wir so Halsdrähte um diese Fruchtpresse gemacht und uns für 20 € eine Fruchtpresse gekauft und das ging dann auch schon. Wir müssen auch ganz, ganz schnell, ganz groß skalieren, weil am Ende zählt der Preis. Ne? Das ist gut, dass man
letztlich nicht dazu bei. Wenn Mercedes doch immer konkurrieren muss mit Kia, dass sie auch viel Räder haben dazu und billiger sind. Nein, das zählt wirklich die Geschichte dahinter.
Die Geschichte, ja klar. Aber am Ende.
Das ist ein zynischer Scheißladen. Viele andere sind nicht so zynisch.
Die Frage ist ja, es gibt ja viele solche Unternehmen, wo man eben sagt, die haben auch ihre negativen Aspekte, gerade im sozialen Bereich. Sagen wir mit denen jetzt gar nicht zusammenarbeiten, das ist halt wirklich die Frage.
Nein, McDonalds ist nicht Korea, das ist so wie die katholische Kirche.
Aber am Ende, wir wollen ja wirklich einen Impact generieren.
Okay, an der Stelle höre ich auf, das ist eigentlich ein schönes Schlusswort. Wir wollen einen Impact generieren und das Unternehmen von Anne, sorry, wrong language. So, the company that Anne Lamp founded, it's really going through the roof. I just read today on LinkedIn that they made a big contract with Mondis, which is a huge international packaging company. And they also got a lot of funding from the German government, her company, to develop her material further. So I think that's a really extremely positive example that some things are moving in the right direction. So this is where I would like to end.
So many thanks, Isa, for a great overview, and despite all the daunting challenges, it's great to see that there are individuals working on solutions. Cradle to Cradle is a book that is about 20 years old. I don't quite remember when it first came out, but certainly we do have the solutions. The challenge is to make them all viable and to actually change the legislation accordingly. And Felix will tell us a bit more about that side of things, and also shed some light on some other plastic facts, so to speak.
Thanks, Joerg. Thanks, Joerg. So I think Isa and her amazing images and stories are going to be a hard one to follow, but I bring a bit of kind of a systems perspective as the challenge that Joerg asked me. And so I work for a firm called Systemiq, and we're a mix of consultancy, think tank, investor, and we're working on the transformations that we need towards a net zero, net positive, and more equal economy in general. And we've been working on plastics ever since we were founded just after the Paris Climate Agreement. And so I wanted to kind of nail down 3 messages. One is kind of that the challenges are great and growing. The second is that there's no silver bullet, so we need all solutions. And third is that there is some progress and hope, because Joerg also wanted me to highlight some of the positives, and in particular on the policy side, there's a lot of interesting things happening. So in order to tackle this problem, we need change in systemic solutions. Systemiq's been doing a lot of modeling of the plastic system, and in addition to the fact about microplastics and the number of stars, we also found in one of our earlier studies that the amount of plastics in the ocean is going to exceed the amount of fish and sea life in the oceans by 2040 if we continue with the current trajectories. So quite gloomy. We've modeled that on current trends, and our models are generally in line with some of the other leading models. The volume of plastics produced is going to increase by around 66% by 2040. To current levels, the amount of mismanaged plastic is expected to double, and the greenhouse gas emissions associated with that plastic is expected to increase by around 60%. And with that, all the micro and nanoplastics that Isa and the film already highlighted, the biodiversity impacts, the health impacts are also expected to increase. What's also important to note, however, is that growth isn't for no reason, right? Like there's a lot of parts in the world where people are lacking access to safe drinking water and non-perishable food and things like that. So we need to find a way to deliver those benefits to these billions of people going forward, for them to continue to become more prosperous and enjoy healthy lives without the use of plastics, or with much less and safer plastics. And so tackling that problem is really challenging. Our modeling generally finds that there's no silver bullets. So we try to model different kind of pathways towards averting that trajectory of rising plastic and plastic pollution. And we find that we can't recycle our way out of the problem. There's around 2 billion people lacking access to waste management services today. By 2040, that's expected to grow to around 4 billion people. And we did that calculation in 2020. That would mean around 500,000 people per day getting access to waste management services. So it's a really unfathomable scale, really difficult to try to implement in rural areas in developing countries, for example. The global recycling rate is around 10% currently, so we're very far off, and then most of that recycling is kind of a single-use downcycling to something else, and it doesn't get recycled more than once. And then also, we can try to remedy some of the plastic waste that's already out there, and I think some of the other panelists will talk about that. But really, we need to tackle the upstream. We need to stop, the growth of plastic consumption, the plastic that goes into the ocean. So the best way to do that is to kind of follow the waste hierarchy, go as upstream as possible, try to reduce the use of plastic as much as possible, eliminate the use of unnecessary plastic, so for example through bans of single-use plastics, which luckily we're seeing increasingly, but also through other models like reuse systems, or other delivery models like concentrates. So why are we packaging massive plastic packages of detergent if really that's just 98% water and a little bit of powder that people can mix at home, that can be transported with much lower greenhouse gas emissions, etc. Right? Like shifting to new formats, new delivery models can be really effective in reducing the amount of packaging and greenhouse gas emissions in that process. So all of that's required. We also need to completely design plastics quite differently. Currently, they're not designed for recyclability, to be biodegradable, etc. And it starts with the fact that plastics isn't one thing. There's around 12 major polymers, which is kind of the big components. But there's over 16,000 chemicals that are added to give various properties to plastics. And no one knows what's in those plastics. The companies that put their products into it don't really know. It's kind of the secrets of the manufacturers of the plastic. And so we don't really know. And then obviously also dealing with plastic that has that diversity is really difficult in a way that actually is sustainable. And so we need to simplify drastically and harmonize the types of plastics that we produce. And I'll touch upon the chemicals again in a little bit in a second. The other thing, we saw Traceless, which is an amazing example of substitutes, and there's luckily lots of promising innovation happening. But we also need to really carefully consider the pros and cons to make sure we don't have undesirable substitution, right? So there's, what's the greenhouse gas emissions impact? How heavy are these products? Are they scalable? What's the land use implications, water use, etc.? And I'll just touch upon a couple of examples in that context. So, it sounds really good to have bio-based materials, but bio-based material just means that natural ingredients are being used and manipulated to produce something that's identical to the other polymers. And so then we have the exact same problem of dealing with them as we have with fossil fuel-derived plastics. So that's not the answer. They have to be bio-based and biodegradable. And then also on biodegradable, a lot of biodegradable products are only degrade and break down in the right environments. And so you think biodegradable is great, but it could be that in the environment it actually lasts for years or decades, and then it might still also break down into micro and nanoplastics and have harmful effects. So also quite concerning. And then the other thing that Isa already highlighted as well, you pointed to, and you saw with Cancer Alley in the US, the chemicals of concern. I said there's around a bit more than 16,000 chemicals associated with plastics. And for most of them, they've not really been tested. We really don't understand what's in those chemicals, what their impact is individually and in combination when they're combined into plastics. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen BPA-free as something that is advertised with plastic, and that means bisphenol A. which is a chemical that was frequently used and still is frequently used in many cases for plastics. And it has various health impacts, but one of them is that it is kind of hormone-like. So it impacts the human hormone, the endocrine system, and disrupts it and can affect things like fertility and things like that. And we've come up with plenty of alternatives. The industry, when they see the evidence piling up, they say, oh, we're going to change a few molecules here and there on the non-functioning parts of that, of BPA. And so there's such wonderful things as bisphenol B and C and D and E. And they are functionally the same, and no one's ever tested whether they have the same problematic characteristics as BPA. And so actually, the phasing out of BPA has been happening for decades now. But the UBA, the German Federal Environment Agency, did a study a few years ago testing 44 alternatives to bisphenol A, and they found that 43 of them exhibit the same characteristics in terms of inhibiting and impacting the endocrine system. So in terms of all the substitutes, we need to be really careful that we treat things as kind of classes. If they share the same biophysical properties to a large extent, we should also make sure that they don't share the negative impacts that we see from some of the chemicals they're meant to replace, for example. And then lastly, I'm sure I'm running out of time, but I think, obviously we also need to expand waste management. It can't be the solution alone. So we need to make sure we put in place policies like extended producer responsibility that raise money to expand the waste management solutions in the places that currently lack it. But that can't be the answer. We can't recycle our way out of it. So we need kind of everything across the life cycle in terms of approaches. And so to get a bit to the glimmer of hope, so we've seen Traceless, there's lots and lots of companies working on this, lots of innovation and interest, partially due to documentary filmmakers. It's really raised the profile. I think plastic really entered the public consciousness partially because of Planet Earth 2? I'm misremembering, but in 2016 or something, it was the David Attenborough second series of nature documentaries that really had a big episode featuring plastics. And that is so important in making, building the awareness and the consciousness. And then there's a lot of innovation happening, and there's also a lot of policy innovation happening. So in the EU, you're starting to see, only a few months ago, the packaging and packaging waste regulation being now close to finalized. There's still a lot to be done, but it's starting to ban certain types of packaging if they actually don't meet, in practice, high recycling rates, just as an example. And over the last 2 and a bit years, there's been international global negotiations for a UN agreement to end plastic pollution. And so there's a global momentum. All member states signed up to develop an instrument that takes a full life cycle approach to eliminate plastic pollution. The negotiations haven't been going great. We're quite close to it. We've been doing quite a bit of modeling and working with some of the most ambitious countries, with the UN, with a lot of companies in that context as well. But we did a modeling exercise of different scenarios of this plastic treaty and the impact it could have. And so just a bit of a notion of hope. So we found that a global scenario that actually has binding, harmonized rules and a full life cycle approach and doesn't just focus on the downstream could reduce mismanaged plastic waste by 90% compared to 2019. It actually is cheaper than the business as usual trajectory, because if you have that growth of plastic waste continuing, you need more and more waste management infrastructure to deal with the problems. Actually, for governments, it's cheaper. And we also looked at the value chain, the economic activity generated currently by the plastic system, largely by fossil fuel-derived plastics and their conversion. And under that scenario, there would be shift in economic value to things like different business models, alternatives, reuse, recycling, and so on. That would far outweigh the losses. Even in fossil fuel dependent and chemical producing regions, you see that due to this overall growth in this kind of activity and the higher labor intensity of some of these other activities, the economic activity, the jobs linked to it will be growing. It will offset the negative concerns about potential minor declines in fossil fuel and petrochemical industries today. So that's the kind of messages that we're bringing to the negotiators as part of the UN negotiations, and we're working with some of the biggest countries that are kind of on the fence about embracing an ambitious treaty because they're concerned, understandably, about the economic impacts that it will have on their industry, their economies. And so, that's the kind of messages that we're trying to bring to bring these negotiations to a hopefully positive outcome for all of us.
So a multifaceted problem, and we need to kind of go up the value chain to really tackle the problem. Reduce, reuse, recycle, a slogan that has been around for many years, but more urgent than ever to tackle these problems. And one of the entrepreneurs who has found a way to tackle the problem, especially as far as river plastic is concerned, is Karsten Hirsch. He will tell us a bit more about his company and how they are tackling the challenge.
Thank you. Joerg, thanks for the invitation and also for the positioning of me speaking. I was very happy to speak after Isa and Felix because I thought I could add maybe onto what we have heard, but I should have brought my notebook because I had so many thoughts and I thought I'm going to refer to that. I didn't bring my notebook, so I'll probably forget to a couple of things I wanted to say, but I'm happy to introduce you to Plastic Fischer, a company I founded 5 years ago with my co-founder Joerg, who's here with me today. And I'll give you a little bit of a story of our journey because we are still in the phase of figuring things out because the topic of plastic pollution is very complex, as we heard already. So 5 years ago, I just graduated from law school and I went to Vietnam on vacation with Joerg and another friend of ours, and we saw how plastic was going down the Mekong River, and we were pretty shocked by the visual that we had 24/7. And back home we realized there was no company in the world addressing ocean plastic pollution in rivers, and we thought, well, most of it, or a lot of it, seems to come from there. So we said, okay, let's try to figure it out, and founded the first company to address ocean plastic in rivers. And if we scroll down, then we see what we invented. So I moved to this place that we saw in the first slide, to Indonesia, to the Citarum River. This is one of the most polluted rivers in the world. And I'm a lawyer, my co-founder, a graphic designer. We were in Indonesia and never had been working with waste, no engineers in the team, so we had the idea to figure out something very simple that can be built anywhere in the world from locally available material so that we ensure it is scalable, it can be repaired anywhere in the world, and that it is low cost. And we came up with this barrier and we met the National Army of Indonesia, who was working in this river because the river went viral on social media because it was so polluted, and the president said, okay, we need to clean that up. And so they gathered the army to make the Citarum River into drinking water quality within 7 years. I was in Indonesia a few months ago, and they have 1 year left to make it drinking water quality, and I can tell you it's still not there, but we're making progress. The country is making progress, but we had the army there who really believed, okay, these guys from Germany are coming back and forth for 6 months in a row, every day, trying to figure something out. And with this barrier, we actually had some technology in our hands that could actually be scalable and doing the job. We figured out it doesn't require high tech to stop most of the ocean plastic. Because in rivers, a lot of the plastic is still in the first 50 centimeters of the water column, while in the oceans we only have like 1% of plastic that is still flowing on the surface. And we have the problem that it breaks down into microplastic and destroys entire ecosystems and ends up through the food chain on our plates. So by intercepting it earlier, we thought, we're going to prevent also microplastic. And could you please go to the next slide? Well, we also said, or what we figured out is we need to be responsible for the material that we collect, because what happens if you put a system like this into the water? It stops a load of plastic every day, but then it starts smelling, it causes floodings, and we wanted to be responsible for what we have caused by putting a system into a polluted river and stopping all this plastic. So we said, okay, we're going to make sure this plastic is treated the best way possible. And we already saw, there is not the perfect solution for material that ends up in the environment. And most of the plastic that we find in our systems are these sachets. I think it's too small for everyone to see, but it's multi-layer plastic, and inside of it is aluminium. So it is not made for recycling, and this is why it ends up in the river. It has no value, it cannot be recycled, and we collect all this material that no one else wants to have. But what we can also do is we create local jobs. For all of these people, they would never have a formal employment without us. So they would go every day to the streets and try to figure out, how can I make $5 to make a living? And we set up these sorting facilities where we bring all the river plastic, where we segregate it, we dry it, and we make sure that all recyclable material, which are 5% of the material that we collect, find their way back into the supply chain. The vast majority is going to cement plants where it is incinerated, and we saw what happens with the dust eventually. I don't know the English word, but it ends beneath the earth, and it's not ideal, but it's, for us, currently the best alternative to landfilling or the oceans. How do you finance an operation like this? Because, and I think this is the biggest challenge here. Plastic pollution is such a complex topic, and I'm still figuring it out 5 years later, because there's so much plastic being produced every day and consumed by so many different stakeholders, and there is no solution to process this material. And the governments with which we are working in India and Indonesia, there's a lot of corruption going on, and there is a lot of money made by not making waste traceable. Actually, the people that could trace the waste earn a lot of money by not tracing this waste, and no one knows how much how much waste is generated in the cities where we are operating in and where this waste is going. And this is one of the problems that we're facing, that the decision makers who would change the status quo are actually making a lot of money by not changing the status quo. What we also heard is that we need to go more upstream, and I absolutely agree with that, and that's what we also do. We are very transparent in communicating that we're not the solution for what we're doing here. By collecting it in rivers, we're collecting it more upstream than in the oceans, but we're still only fighting a symptom here. We want to go more upstream, so we provide also household waste management services for the local people. And this is addressing a need that I think many people in Europe do not have on their radar, because a lot of times people come to me and say, look, this is great what you do, but you need to raise awareness. And maybe you can just go to the next slide. And I absolutely agree that awareness plays a crucial role in this whole topic, but if I tell, you're all aware that we need to segregate our waste and that we need to put it in the right bin, etc., but what are you doing with the waste if tomorrow the waste truck is not picking up your waste? Where do you bring it? What do you do with the waste, with all your awareness you have? And you will figure out, okay, I'm gonna either burn it in front of my house, or I throw it to the neighbor, or I put it in the Spree here at Rhine in Cologne, where I'm from. And you're pretty soon at the same position where these people are, where we are currently operating, because there is no alternative to dumping it in the environment. So awareness has to come with infrastructure, and then we can make a difference. So what we need is to do this holistic approach, and that's what Plastic Fish is trying to do. Also providing alternatives to just open dumping and incineration. And one more minute I need to close here. So we figured out, so we founded this company with the idea, okay, we need to do something. And we had some business model idea of, okay, we're just gonna sell all these PET bottles that we're gonna find, and then we make this a viable business. Then we figured out, hey, in Indonesia, you don't find any plastic bottles because the informal sector collects all the valuables, and we're left with the stuff that no one wants and that is not valuable. So we said, okay, we're gonna do something like carbon credits, and we called it Plastic Fisher credits. That's 5 years ago. And now we have something developing the plastic credit market, and it's a very challenging topic, but I think we, with Plastic Fisher, we make a point that it actually can help if we create additionality, and we are financing through the sales of plastic credits something, collection that wouldn't happen without us, and we are addressing the private sector to give us money to do this social and environmental impact for multiple reasons. You can use it as your sustainability strategy, employer branding reasons, marketing, etc. And we want to build a case that we say we're going to scale this up now with private money and to a certain extent until we prove to the governments that Plastic Fischer can actually be a reliable contractor to get the job done, at least when it comes to household waste management services and river plastic collection. And this eventually then hopefully will result in significant scale, because this is what we need at a global problem like plastic pollution, because I can do this now, and we win the German Sustainability Award, where I met Professor Braungart, who made the Laudatio for Sebastian Vettel, and he compared him with Jesus. So he is a very fun guy, but very knowledgeable also. And when he saw our barriers, he also told me, hey, you need to get rid of this PVC because of the microplastics and so. And I said, yeah, you're right, you know, but one step at a time, and we try to improve. Well, we had these big barriers. We made them out of these PVC pipes because you can get them anywhere in the world. And now we're making them actually from LDPE. And the future ideas, and we're actually doing this batch this month, that we are producing our floaters from the river plastic that we have collected. And with this, we introduce material into our own operations that currently ends up in cement plants. So, yeah, currently we rely on the private sector, but hopefully the government support us in the future. Thanks.
And I think there's one more slide with some company statistics. Do you want to show that as well, the last slide?
So one slide back, please, because this is about hope, the other slide. Can you go one slide up? Because I used to end my presentations with another picture of pollution, and then I figured out, well, you need to give people some sort of hope. So this is Varanasi, this is the spiritual capital of India. And we work there and have stopped 300 tons of river plastic from entering the most polluted river in the world. We actually try to get the Ganges off the #1 position of the most polluted rivers in the world by scaling across this beautiful river. And yeah, and on the other slide we see what we did in the last 3 years. Created nearly 80 full-time jobs for local people, and more than 25,000 people joined our cleanup activities. Collected more than 1,500 tons of river plastic, and do this in 42 rivers. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. So I think if a lawyer can clean the rivers of Southeast Asia, then we can all do something and contribute to the solution. And Anna is also a person I'm very impressed by, because she's working on a very local level, speaking with politicians, both at the Berlin Senate and also with parliamentarians at the Bundestag, and convincing them of activities and giving them some insights what it looks like on the ground, what people can do, how legislation needs to change in order to address the root causes. So Anna, I'll give you the microphone, and if you could elaborate a little bit on your approach and how other people can contribute as well and make a difference. Yeah. Okay.
Hi. I try to bring some love in the topic of waste. I had a burnout 10 years ago, and then I realized I had all these big problems. I saw all these big problems in the world, and waste was one of it. But then there was one point I realized that 5 years of demonstrating on the streets and nothing changed. I had the idea maybe I can do something instead of complaining. So in the beginning of Corona I founded Litterpicker. I had the idea maybe I can start with my own street, and I bought this picker. These are to pick up trash. I organized the first cleanup in Berlin-Wedding, and I had afraid that nobody will come, but actually at the first meeting more than 20 people came, and it was a lot of fun, and we cleaned up together, and we realized that it's so nice to come together and do something for the environment instead of being against something, that we decided to do it every week. So 3 years later, we did over 200 cleanups. We had the biggest cleanup at World Cleanup Day in Plötzensee with 200 people coming together. And I realized in this time that it's nice to come together and fill this topic with some love and fun, because I thought maybe we can throw the better party than those who destroy the world, and then people would like to be part of this. So yeah, we, as I studied anthropology before, I tried to also have a look where's the problem, and in 3 years you can imagine you see like a lot of trash, but also you meet a lot of people, and the people also see I thought that the problem are the others and not me, but when I started to do something, I realized that by going into the field and by it's something different when you think about something theoretically, but when you go out with a picker and you pick up something, you realize, okay, 80% of the litter is, for example, cigarettes, and cigarettes also have this microplastic. So I thought maybe I can do something, and then I asked the tobacco industry. We had McDonald's. No, can we work with McDonald's together? The tobacco industry maybe is a little bit worse than McDonald's, but I thought maybe I can write them an email and that we meet each other. And I invited the tobacco industry, I invited the local government, I invited the BVG, which is our public transportation system. I invited the BSR and Deutsche Bahn. Martin from Waste Reduction, he was also there. And actually in one meeting we met in front of Gesundbrunnen. Everyone had a picker, and I told them we have a framing. We don't talk about problems today, we talk about solutions. Let's have a look in this little scale, Gesundbrunnen. Why are here so many cigarettes on the ground? And we had just had a look. Okay, can we make an ashtray here? No, it's forbidden because of Denkmalschutz. Why is there so much cigarettes on the ground? Yeah, because BSR with the wagons, they cannot pick them up. And then the BVG also said they are very interested in this topic. And then I asked a question. In Japan, there's no trash bins, but there's also no trash on the ground. How do they solve the problem? Does anyone has an idea?
They all take their waste back home.
Yes, they all take their waste back home, and they learn it in school, in kindergarten. Every child in Japan has to learn how to clean metal, how to clean plastic, how to clean stones. So they really have a big education on this. And then we had, we realized that this is one point, we need more education, and we need more people who go out and communicate also with the people. We have music, we have this lights on our head when we go out in winter time, but we also give presents to the people. We make like a little fun out of it, a little party. But now, after 3 years, we are also experts, and the Bundestag asked us, what do you find the most, and ask us if we have solutions. And now we can talk to them and inspire them, and yeah, it's for me it's funny to see how little changes you can make. It can lead to something more. So the tobacco industry, to bring this story to an end, they now decided they have to pay a lot of money because of the microplastic. So because of our meetings, and we now have a little meeting group of all the big actors in Berlin, they decided that they will change it next year, that all the filters won't have microplastic inside anymore. And I realized that when we also try to communicate with the big players, with players you wouldn't talk to normally, they can make a big change, and this can lead to a lot of impact. So I think it's good to come together, and for this the topic of waste is really a nice topic, because we can just solve it all together. When just companies change something and nobody uses, for example, the recups, then this is not the whole solution. When politicians decide to bring something, they forbid plastic bags, the companies will make bigger plastic bags. So this is a topic we can just solve it all together, and therefore I think it's good to go out to do something instead of complaining, but also to work together instead of against each other, and to make some fun, and to also talk to the people and not only blame them, but because I realized when people sit there and they just throw something on the ground and you talk to them and you give, for example, an ashtray, or you ask them, why do you do that, then change will happen on a small scale. In the end, some people that sit in a park, they won't look at the app, or some things you can't change with high tech. Some things you have to change with communication, and just go out and show the people that it's also fun to engage yourself for the nature or do something together. This is my part in this. I like that you're documenting it, that you show that we have people that know all the facts, but my part is more to communicate, to make fun, to make a little party and bring some love in this topic.
And thanks very much, Anna. And what you also show is that you have shown that humanizing the approach towards solving the problem is also very important. That even in the tobacco industry, you've got human beings who you can talk to and that are willing to change if you talk to them in the right way. So taking a multi-stakeholder approach is very important, and the fun aspect obviously being very important as well in order to get people together. And now, just for you to know what we've planned now, so as I said earlier, there's an empty chair. So if somebody feels called to say something, either an expert or non-expert, make a statement, feel free to get up and sit down and share your insight. Otherwise, we'll ask a few more questions and then open up the discussion to the audience and have, if time allows, small group discussions. But maybe just to get the conversation started, Fabian and I will ask just a few questions. And one thing that comes to my mind is really, and whoever from the panelists feels called to answer the question, it seems that we keep chasing the problem because in a way, the market as it is right now sets the wrong incentives. And maybe somebody from your experience, what can you say? What kind of things, what leverage points are in the market or what do we need to create in order to tackle the root causes rather than the symptoms? And maybe Felix, you're best placed to tackle that question, but if somebody else feels called to answer, please speak up.
Sure. Yeah, I can give it a shot. So I think one of the things it's a bit of a race to the bottom, right? So I think there's, everyone is kind of doing their own thing. Every company is trying to optimize for their economic performance, etc. So I think legislation, government can play an important role. The other thing that we do a lot of at Systemiq is trying to build coalitions, working with the big players, try to identify common problems, trying to tackle the first mover disadvantage, right? Like being the first to try to adopt a new solution is usually costly, very risky for individual businesses to try to do. So we, across all the areas we work in, we tend to build coalitions of trying to get companies to agree. So we work, for example, with something called the Consumer Goods Forum, setting design rules for big global brands like Nestle, Unilever, Coke, etc. So trying to work with, again, I think the fact that a few of us said, right, like we need to work with the big players who can change the system, who are part of the system, have the expertise and the resources to actually make a difference. And so trying to set a baseline of, what can we agree on, what are the changes we need, and also advocating for that change towards governments so that the right kind of shared infrastructure can be developed. So for example, again, in the plastics treaty negotiations, there's what's called the Business Coalition for a plastics treaty, and there's over 200 businesses, including, again, some of the really big firms, and they're basically calling for globally harmonized rules, because for them to try to comply with hundreds of different regulations in different countries is really, really difficult. So trying to bring people together, working with the difficult partners, and then setting kind of a common vision of what change needs to look like, and trying to identify the investments and solutions they can build together is a really powerful way of trying to overcome the current lock-in in the system. Anyone else?
Yeah, thank you for the input. I was also wondering, you all have different perspectives on the people who are responsible, and everyone in a sense is responsible of us by ourselves. But what would you say from your experience talking to different stakeholders? What is the major topics that drive accountability, both for corporates and for personal, like for people? You mentioned it previously, just talking to them, making everyone realize what your own consumption can make, and like use of plastic, what kind of effect can that make, but also from the corporate perspectives, talking to lobbyists, etc. What would you say are the key drivers from your experience that drive accountability in that topic?
So I think, we need to make a lot of noise as a society. I think that we get heard. Of course, things are not going to change immediately because there's a lot of profit being made, obviously. But if we stop making noise, then nothing will happen. So we have to really make noise, and this film is trying to make noise, and you guys everybody here is doing it in their own term, and every email, every social media post we can create, is doing something. We're like a big mosaic, and everybody can contribute something. So I think that's super important. So yeah, that's sort of what comes first to mind to me.
We're speaking with Plastic Fischer to a couple of big petrochemical companies, and the interesting thing for me is always that I actually get a meeting with these people, like with the managing director of these large companies, and I wonder why this is the case. And with some of them, we actually also work together with. We have one big polymer producer who is financing an operation in India, and in this location we find a lot of PU foam. This is the yellow foam you find in fridges, for example, and this stuff is currently not being recycled, and it's a leftover which is dumped by scrapper, how do you call people that work in a scrap yard, and they take out the metals but then discharge the non-recyclables at the oceans. And we collect all this PU foam, and was imagine this entire room, I think, filled with yellow foam is what we collected in the last probably 6 months on this foam, and we store it, and we then try to compress it, we shred it, and then we bring it to incineration because there is currently no other option. And we brought the managing director of this of the country to our operation, and we showed him what we're doing. And he was really shocked to see all this material. And you know, we were there and we saw that he sincerely was saying, what the hell is going on and how can this happen? And then he started internally trying to figure out, can we do something about it? You know, because we proposed something like a buyback scheme, that the company would buy that back and then try to figure out with us, how can we reintroduce this material back into their supply chain, maybe through chemical recycling or so. And I mean, let's see if something happens or it was just one shock and then we get back to the commercials. But I think this also has a good chance of changing something, is speaking to these big companies and trying to make something happen. If we only would say, you know, these are the evil guys who are polluting the entire environment, then they're not going to talk and maybe they're not going to act. So, but sometimes you need a shitstorm to really kick off some action. So I don't know, to me it's very weird, you know, because I can speak with them because they see an opportunity to position themselves there and polish their image. On the other hand, we also see the opportunity to make them move maybe into the right direction and change something within their own supply chain. But Systemiq is working with Borealis in Indonesia, Project Stop. I think this is a super interesting example, and now that we're talking here openly, maybe I can ask a question that I just had in my mind, and this is how, if you're a consultant and working with Borealis on a project like that, and you can probably explain better what Project Stop is about, how do you manage not to get basically dragged into their side of things, of having maybe their own ideas of, you know, or intentions on why are they doing this thing, you know, because they are also trying to manage their image, etc. And you are a consultant really trying to push them in the right direction, but they have their own interest, and so this is a somewhat conflict of interest. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So just for context, so Project Stop basically, so Systemiq, we're about 400 people now globally, and we have offices largely in Europe, but also in Brazil and Indonesia since the very early days. And so in Indonesia, since 2017, 2016, we've been trying to build and scale local waste management infrastructure, because again, this is an area where there is currently no waste management infrastructure, so people don't really have an option other than waste ending up in the environment somehow. And so, you know, amongst others funders, there's Borealis, but there's also something called the Alliance to End Plastic Waste. A lot of industry voices that are trying to shift the dynamic around their perception on plastic waste maybe in the public eye. But they're not, you know, they're funders in that instance, and so probably similar to the context in which you're, you know, working with polymer producers, etc. You know, we are basically trying to scale waste management solutions there. We started in a few local areas. We're scaling it up now, working with the government to try to scale it, show that it's actually scalable. And so corporate investors are a part of that, but they're not, you know, this is not one where, not a project where we are kind of advocating a particular policy or anything that's in their interest. We're just trying to really solve the problem in a very hands-on way there. But we also work with, so for example, on our plastics modeling, we actually worked with Plastics Europe, the European Plastics Association, which comparatively to the American Chemistry Council is like actually quite progressive, comparatively. But basically they asked us to come up with, you know, try to model what would a net zero plastics industry in Europe look like and what changes would you need to make. And they've actually adopted a lot of things in terms of their positions and planning now that they wouldn't have had otherwise. So we try to work with everyone. We work with the UN, we work with country governments, we work with, you know, all the big NGOs, so, and a lot of scientists. So we're trying to be kind of involved in all the conversations, but yeah, you're right. It's important to try to make sure we are independent. So for the actual reports, like when we worked on with Plastics Europe, we had an independent scientific advisory panel. And so they commissioned the research, but we had, you know, academics scrutinizing the assumptions and the messaging, etc. So we're trying to make sure we are kind of divided there in terms of who's funding it and what the actual messages are.
I just find it really confusing the way they are acting. Plastics Europe, for example, and I mean, we haven't used the term greenwashing yet, but we should, I think, bring it in the conversation because, I mean, as your project is amazing, but of course, these companies could also be using you, as you said it actually, to polish their image as part of their greenwashing. And I mean, Herr Bühler, the CEO of Plastics Europe, he's in our film, and he's like the most moralistic person in the film. He's always talking about how everything needs to change, and we need to realize, otherwise our existence will end on this planet, and so on. And he's like super good at saying these things. You really believe him. And then I read that the European Union is trying to ban BPA, this chemical hormone disruptor you were talking about before. And who's the first one that is trying to fight the ban? It's Plastics Europe. So I've become quite cynical over the course of making this film. Also, like you say, it's great you get to meet these petrochemical companies. Like, why did they not reply to our request to talk to them? There was no transparency and no step forward. So I have a feeling, I mean, I didn't get a good feeling about them, that there is individuals that do want to change. I believe that, when the guy you met, he was shocked and so on. And even Herr Bühler, I think, he would like to change more. He's, relatively young, he's new in the industry. But the structures and the profit making in the background, it's just huge, and it's just preventing large-scale change.
Was it a question from you, or just a...
If you want, please add to it. I mean, it was just sharing my impression, but there's of course many questions tied into it.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree, right? Like, I think it's super important to be skeptical, right? But I think, so I found the same trying to talk to lobbyists, etc. In all the companies, you tend to have the PR people who are also the policy people. It's always very closely linked in terms of public perception versus actually advocacy, etc. It's not really the core business functions usually that you're working with when you're talking to them, which is strange when you're talking about changing the operations of a company. You're always talking about PR often. But part of what we're trying to do, so for example, we're working with some of the big on-the-fence countries like Brazil, China, India, Indonesia, because we see them as kind of the pivotal blockers in negotiations, or on-the-fence countries, because they have massive petrochemical industries. And so we're working with them to try to show them actually there is, if your industries change, there is a role for them in the future system. They have a lot of the expertise, the capital to build this future. So we're trying to get them away from this blocking position. And so, for example, in the context of Brazil, right, they have a very progressive president, very pro the environment, but they still have a very potent fossil fuel industry and lobby. And so trying to work with them to show them the evidence base and try to give them the courage to stand up to industry is a really important way in which we're trying to affect the industries. But I think all of us have said, right, like, it's helpful to try to work with the big players. You just have to be quite careful because it's difficult whether they actually choose to act or just are saying what's nice to hear.
But sometimes you also need a shitstorm.
Agreed.
It was at the beginning when we had the first meeting we wanted to pick up, and then I called the BSR and I asked, okay, where can I put the trash afterwards? And they told me I have to pay €6 per bag and bring it to them for making their work. That was my... So at the beginning I had a problem view, but I did the shitstorm. I'm a photographer, I do social media, and I wrote an email to all the newspapers I knew. So the next day they called me and they said, no problem. The ARD was there, the first meeting, the BZ was there, and I made the pictures, and they called me and they told me there's no problem, they will pick up the trash. They will, we don't have to pay for it, of course. So I think we have a power with our mobile phone I didn't knew before that we can do. You also told it's the social media, and then the military was there. Yeah, this was the first thing I realized, that we have a power with our mobile phone. But this was more the problem view. Now I have more the solution view because of Project Together and Circular Futures, all these organizations I learned. I got to know some people that are really solving the problems, like Traceless, for example, and I realized that companies are really, before I thought companies are the problem, but companies can also be the solutions. Imagine WeCup, for example, if they wouldn't have created this WeCup, the politicians could, I don't know, they could decide we need WeCups, or we need single use is forbidden, but the companies, they build new stuff like Traceless, or this is, I think this is more important than to look at the problems, to see, okay, let's do something new, let's change something.
Both really valid perspectives. We have a first guest from the audience. Maybe you can introduce yourself quickly, and then,
Hi, my name is Svenja. I'm working for Beyond Biodelphi, and thank you so much for all your input. It was very inspiring. And I think what is the comment I wanted to make is that most of you make a problem visible, so with you to really pick out the waste from the river, to show what is the extent of the waste, and to show also what's behind it, and show the little ingredients of waste is very, very, making it visible, same as you. And that brings me to an input I wanted to make, which is at a very different level, on a corporate level, if you do accounting, and that's kind of my business, to do carbon accounting, and I know it's just one part of the environmental impacts waste have, and materials have, but it shows kind of a reality, and it brings something to light. And to give you an example, we are working with hospitals, and hospitals are consumers of one-way plastics in the terms of gloves. So gloves were used of course, for hygiene reasons. And with the corona pandemic, the increase of gloves in hospital was really massive. So I think 3 times the gloves were used as pre-pandemic phase. And we see now that even beyond or after the pandemic, gloves are used in the same amount. So the carbon accounting and really looking at the impacts of material use and waste is bringing something to light. And now we are talking with environmental management of these hospitals to really find out the reasons why these one-way plastic gloves are used to such an extent, and to really see, what are the reasons behind, and how can we approach this problem. And I think this is in the same way, on a very different level, shedding light on a problem, to really look at why do we use plastic, and what are maybe ways to manage it better.
Thank you, Svenja. Heiner, do you have another comment or question? Feel free to grab the microphone.
Well, I feel triggered. You mentioned here the term root causes, and this is very, very dear to me. You see that the professional and fatherly friend of Michael Braungart was Friedhelm Korte. He was the father of ecological chemistry, of the Umweltprobenbank, Environment Specific Bank, and he looked very much with us already more than 35 years ago in what you now talk about PP or about nanotechnology. So I want to really talk with you, maybe bilateral later, on the real root causes. It's been my field since some decades. I was a colleague of Friedhelm Korte in Herbeck, it's a Großforschungsanstalt in Munich. It is not just the harmonization issues, that we don't talk, that we don't have the languages, the wrong nomenclature, but there's something wrong in our governance and policy structures. And my working led me to look in what is the mindset. The real root causes is that we think flat, that we think nominalistic. And I really urge you, and this is my plea, to look into Friedhelm Korte, because it was all known. It was all there. Why wasn't it picked up? Why we were screwed?
Because you did it.
Pardon? Why we were screwed, and I feel interrupted. So anyway, let's try to go to discuss how to look into our mind bugs and to make a difference by looking on how we vote, how we find community, and what the scales, proportions, consequences of our action are. I mean, long view, big picture, not bullshitting. Peanuts.
So let's take one more comment, and then let's maybe have small group discussions, actually picking up on Heine's point regarding root causes, and then we will slowly wrap up with another brief round of comments. But now over to you.
Thank you. My name is Christian. I run a startup out of Hamburg for 5 years called Surplus, and we're a digital platform that helps companies buy and sell recycled plastics at scale, coming from the understanding that if we don't create markets for the waste, we'll never solve the problem. We can collect all we want, but then we end up incinerating it, and we saw it in the film, fantastic film by the way, that we cannot solve the problem. And just a few very brief remarks before my question comes. Remark number one, Ingmar Bühler, whom you call the most moralistic, he just got sacked, he just got fired, and rumor in the industry is that it is partially because he was in your movie. I don't have, yeah, so you know that you describe him as a beacon of hope within the industry, and you talked about collaboration, and you too, Felix, 5 years in that industry trying to build something to solve, I can tell you, it's no use. I don't want to be pessimistic here, because I'm a solution builder, but I think the reason also why no one from the plastic industry is here tonight, why the people refuse it, I think these are delaying tactics that we've seen over and over again, that we are essentially here as a group telling them, your business model is shit. You are selling virgin plastic, you're polluting our planet, you need to stop. And all of us here, we try to get them move away, and they are paying expensive consultancy firms, also like Systemiq, you know, and essentially to help them build their narrative around how to close the loop on plastics on their terms. We haven't discussed it tonight, we move away, it's called chemical recycling. But long story short, 5 years trying to build to break the main cause of this thing, it's not working when you talk to the big petrochemicals. And final comment before the question comes, the company you're probably speaking with, Covestro, is one of the biggest plastic producers in Germany. The news just broke today that they're about to be sold to the biggest oil and gas company in ADNOC, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, whose CEO is also coincidentally running the COP process, right? I mean, this is the screwed up world we live in. Those of you who've seen Al Gore at Davos talk about it, we put a CEO of an oil and gas company in charge of running the process for us to defossilize and decarbonize. I think if that doesn't make you mad, it's high time to make mass. I actually advertise for something I call activist entrepreneurship, because all the solutions that you're building, that you showcase, we need more of it. But the realization also is we are living in a country where the number three employer is the chemical industry, where even Green Party members like Oliver Fischer from NRW, the environmental ministers, they're advertising solutions by the chemical industry, like chemical recycling. I think in Germany we are not in a good position, as long as we are doing this in a democratic way, to move away from the problem we're seeing here, because ultimately these are voters and really well-paying jobs, and none of the chemical industry is here in the room tonight. And when we're talking to each other, that's great, because we come to a conclusion that plastic is bad, we need to move away. But the real people who are benefiting from it are not in the room. And they also say we need to collaborate, but in reality they don't. So my question is here, coming to that, the core problem really is, what can we do to break the fundamental market problem here, that it is much cheaper for companies to use virgin plastic, new plastic, than any of the sustainable solutions such as biodegradable materials, recycled plastics in good quality. There are some solutions, but they're so expensive that when you talk to companies, they say, well, it cost me 50% more. I'm Procter & Gamble or I'm Bayersdorf or Henkel, and it costs me 50% more to become more sustainable. I'm not going to do it because the consumers won't really reward me. So my question to you and all of us here is, what can we really do to break through that fundamental market dysfunctionality that virgin plastic is just so dirt cheap that no one is investing and buying the sustainable solutions that are out there?
I know that we have at least one former Procter & Gamble employee here in the audience, and maybe that person feels called to say something on the question. But maybe before that, let's have some small group discussions of 5 to 10 minutes between 3 and 4 people, just in order to kind of think and reflect on what has been discussed. First and foremost, where do you see your leverage points? What can you do? What are the root causes from your perspective? And then we'll see how to collect some ideas and then slowly but surely wrap up, and also let 3 nonprofits speak that may allow you to deepen the discussion further, continue the conversation, and be part of the solution rather than the problem.
Sorry, can I just add to what you said?
Yeah.
Thank you for that great comment. I think it's taxation is pretty much the only way to go, and Herr Braungart says it in our film also, that if you produce plastics which is made from oil, as we now know, you don't have to pay taxes. The fossil fuel tax, you're freed from the fossil fuel tax that you have to pay on all other ways of using fossil fuel for transportation, for heating, and so on. So it's artificially cheap, this material, actually. And if we had the actual price of that material, where the costs, the health costs and the environmental costs, and just the normal goddamn taxes are put onto that material, we wouldn't have such a cheap material. And so I mean, that's probably the only way to go. I don't know how you guys see it, but yeah.
Yeah. Turn around to your neighbors, have a conversation, and we'll come back in about 5 minutes.
Würden wir jetzt sozusagen den Raum auch öffnen, aus den Diskussionen, die sich ergeben haben, dass wir gerne auch noch die Perspektiven hören können auf dem freien Stuhl. Deswegen die Frage in den Raum: Gibt es irgendjemanden, der gerne auch das teilen möchte, was besprochen wurde oder was diskutiert wurde? Irgendjemand? Gerne, wenn du vorne Platz nehmen willst. Ich werde dich kurz vorstellen.
Hi, ich bin Alexa. Should I do it in English? I'm Alexa. I work at Wuppertal Institute and I do my PhD at Leuphana University on circular economy. And I think what I was missing a little bit are the more critical questions in the room, to be honest, because I was thinking about, okay, what are these people working on in this room? And I guess most of you have quite a lot of money and probably also a lot of power. So I was thinking about, if you would change something in your company, in your party, in your environment that you're working in, what would that be? And that would maybe have a little bit more of an impact to do, like, I don't know, pick up. I love your project, but I think the people that are sitting here should do more than picking up cigarette pieces, to be honest, and put the money, like invest the money where it's needed, and also not in end-of-life solutions, but at the very beginning and where the big money is. And I think this is the discussion that we should be having, and not the ones that we were having partly. And I really love the film because it also points that out, that we have to look at the big investments and not at the small solutions.
I mean, I don't know who's sitting in the room, and I think someone wants to comment on that. I absolutely agree, but I mean, I was in Davos at the World Economic Forum annual meeting, and I think there, this question or this remark would be placed absolutely right, because they are the people who can change things. but I can tell you only the 10 entrepreneurs that were invited by the innovation platform of the forum were the ones who were trying to change, or I mean, the slogan is committing to change. What is the slogan of the World Economic Forum? Committed to change this, to improve the status quo of the world, something like that. And no one was talking about that. So I think there were the powerful people who could do something, but really there were the closed doors and the business was being made. So Davos would be definitely the right place to bring this question, which I support.
Thank you very much. Very inspiring and enriching round tonight. My name is Louis Klein. I speak today in my capacity as co-editor of the German philosophical business magazine, Agora 42. A couple of years back, we've been involved in an activist art group which staged a capitalism tribunal. They collected in the internet a lot of charges against capitalism and had a few first trials here in Berlin at the different theatres, and had the main tribunal in Vienna, in the Drut. For an entire week, we were reading the charges against capitalism with a full stage, so the prosecutors, the defense, the high judges, and for whatever reason they made me chair of the defense. What I learned in that week about all the charges against capitalism, they went all again against capitalists, what they believed they were, against the companies. What we learned is all those companies play the game according to the rules. If they're not playing according to the rules, well, it's the legal system, and it takes care of them. So whatever we do here, whatever we try to solve, it is micro-solutions within a game that has its rule, and the rules of the game will always define the game. So the solution, and this is sort of a counter-argument to what we just heard, is not with the entrepreneurs, is not with the businesses, is with those who set the rules. So the political realm needs to get much more attention. But what we do at the moment is we suck up all the talent on the business side, with the idea of our startups, social entrepreneurship, and all of that. Who do we leave on the other side? Where does the narrative come from of the lean state? The lean state has become anorexic already. And what we need from the state, the rules and regulations of the game, of a learning game that produces what is desirable and life-sustaining, we're not getting. Probably we're all looking into the wrong direction, and it may, just under our nose, just in the other direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One quick question to you. How can we make that change on a political level? Where are the levers?
What I found very inspiring 5 years ago, just in the year before the last European elections, where in civil societies, corners of discontent, and they all came up and said, oh, we need a new political party. We need to enroll and engage. And I've been with a small group around the kitchen table that time, and back then they got 1 seat in the European Parliament. This time they got 5 seats in the European Parliament. It's a longer way. It is something, I'm talking apparently about Volt. It's just one example, not the example. But
there is entrepreneurship possible in the political arena, and that is something that we owe to our society, to be entrepreneurs in the political realm, and what you're doing is exactly where it starts.
I quick have to answer on this, do not pick up, but I went with the SPD Vorstand, Rosenthaler Platz, to pick up trash, and I went with them right to a piece of shit, and I told them that grandma, she was 70 years old, she had to go there on toilet because there are no toilets. And to pick up with them and talk about this topic right in the middle of the trash, of the shit, it changed something, and then they decided that Berlin-Mitte gets 100 more toilets for the people that live there. I think it can make it different, and I also picked up with people who have billions and who have companies, and sometimes when you pick up trash, you open your consciousness, and then you realize something, you go back in your company, and then you can change something. But by talking, it's not that easy. So I think it was a little bit rude, but picking up is more than you think maybe we can pick up together one day.
Hi, I'm Jens. Here my role is expert on demand, supporting consultancies, investors and large corporates in waste management for more than 20 years now. But I would like to bring in some of the comments that we just discussed. One was definitely, is it easier to motivate people to change something or to put pressure on them or penalties? And we believe motivation is the better way than putting pressure and penalties on people to change, regardless of the system and society and the culture they're coming from. So finding ways of motivating people to change will help much more than talking about pressure. That was one topic. The other thing was really about the amounts that we see out there, the amounts you're collecting, amounts you're finding in maybe landfills, underground landfill sites, and putting them into context. Because having an amount of 100 tons or a couple of 100 tons of waste that goes into underground landfill sites coming from filters, it's also nice to know that we're burning just in Germany 25 million tons of waste every year. So having 100 tons here going into landfill sites and having 25 million tons, it's a relationship. If we talk about numbers in the EU, the amount of plastic that we reduced from 2006 to 2018, plastic waste going to landfill sites, is more than 40%. But we're still putting more than 7 million tons every year on landfill sites. So we're not talking about recycling, that's EU. We're not talking about developing countries, emerging countries, we're talking about EU. So really, the numbers of all organizations collecting waste, helping to educate people, is extremely, extremely, extremely low compared to the amount of waste that we're putting outside in nature. So changing the amount, and recyclability was something we talked about. It's much more important than having all these initiatives, because we need to change the system. Even if we have plastic, it needs to be recyclable, because then we can do in all the countries in the world something about it. If it's just there, we can collect it, we put it into cement plants or maybe underground, but we're not changing it, not at all. So recyclability, we think, is key.
So final comment before we start wrapping up.
I would like to comment on that, because I absolutely agree, and I made this point. I think it's enough what we're doing now to win some awards, but it doesn't make a difference. So that's why we need scale. I think people theoretically can always say, yeah, we need this and that. We need the politics to drive legislation. I agree. We need recyclability. Absolutely agree. We don't need to do what we are doing if this would all be in place, but it is not And until this hasn't changed, I think there is a very strong need to stop what is leaking into the environment and collecting it from the environment and raising awareness for that it is a problem. For you working 20 years in that space or longer, yeah, of course you are aware. But for most of the people around the world, this is not the case. And this is why these initiatives are extremely, I think, valuable, and it's a mix. I don't think that Plastic Fischer, for example, is the solution for the problem, and we're never claimed to do that or to be that. But I think, you know, a lot of things that we heard, we are already aware of that, you know, it needs legislation and it needs execution of these legislations, but then go to India and do it. And this doesn't work like that. So I would love to know, how do you do that? How can you change legislation and executing the theoretical laws that exist into action? I would rather do that. I would love to do that, but I don't know how, and I think it's a very difficult task. Maybe consultants can help us solve, but it's always easy to talk how theoretically things can be solved, because, yeah, if it would be that easy, it would have been done already, and it's not the case.
Okay, so my name is Britta. I'm actually from the fast-moving consumer goods industry, so I'm not from the plastic, but I used to be a Vorstand executive at something like Henkel, right? So I just want to share a couple of perspectives why this is such a complicated topic. I like the example earlier on, like, why is laundry detergent packaged so much? An example is we launched a laundry detergent which actually was totally concentrated, but consumers didn't buy it. Because the really hard reality is, if it isn't cheaper or more convenient, consumers currently say a lot about what they would like to do differently, but the actions are very different. So just to give a little bit of background, also if you think about our quality or standard of living has improved because a lot of this industrialization has led, and we can talk about externalization of costs, but the costs you're paying today for a lot of your products is so much cheaper than it used to be. So one example is today we're spending less than 11% of our income on food. That used to be in the 30–40%. So we are actually, all of us here are benefiting from some of these impacts from the system, and that has led us to, like, you know, we are all hanging on the same drug, that this is very advantageous for all of us. The second part I want to say is, and I want to answer to your question, why are these people so conflicted? If you're in one of these executive roles, so for example in the US, you have a clear legal responsibility to your shareholders. And that means your shareholders, not your stakeholders, which means that you are completely bound to maximize the profit of the company. If you don't do that, you can actually personally sued for disrespecting the wish of your shareholders. So there is, you know, a really kind of, how would I say, systematic problem what we need to change. And that's why I personally strongly believe it has to be a societal movement. It has to create the awareness, and I applaud Anna's examples, because I think making it personal and making it real moves, and then it has to move and change rules and regulations as well. What really does work from a company's point of view is if you have regulations. So for example, in the US, you have to have 25% recycled plastic content in all your plastic containers. That leads to a used plastic market, and you're still buying it, even that it's 3 times more expensive than virgin plastic, because it is a law and you have to oblige or complete the law. The other part I wanted to say is about, yes, we all need to change and think about where we invest our money, but there's another example, and I'm sorry, I'm talking about the US because I spent the last 8 years there. You cannot actually invest your personal pension funds in ESG-specific investments in the US, because if you follow the US, there's a lot of legal debate currently about ESG investing. And so it's actually a lot more complicated, but I think we shouldn't lose hope, because I think all the people are people who want to have a better future for themselves and their children. And I think by raising awareness, by making pressure on all different sides, be it on, you know, the one about the shitstorm. The shitstorm really works on companies, let me tell you that one. And also on legislation, but also on how we spend the money, and also new ideas and new materials. So I think bringing people together, which I loved about Anna's point of view, is the only way forward. There is no point if you kind of try to fight each other. It's a total problem. Sorry.
I think we have one last. Yeah, keep it short. Thank you.
Hi everyone. My name is Umid. I also work as a film director in Berlin. I will make it very short. Making a bit of a jump in topic and being a bit more of a messenger actually for not so much my own input, but from two people that I really admire. One is my dear friend Mazen, who's standing there, but didn't feel like speaking up, but I found it very valuable what he said, so I'll be sharing it because it really resonated. And the second one is from my girlfriend actually, who works a lot with soil and nature. And the first thing that we were just discussing with Mazen, I just found it very interesting because he was, we were just speaking about this, that now there's a lot of awareness here on the topic of plastic. And I think it's very interesting just now to invite awareness into an overarching theme of nature and earth, and plastic is definitely one of that. And we were just wondering if you would remove the awareness on plastic in this room, how much awareness would be on all the other things that connect to, let's say, finding regenerative pathways forwards towards a healthy earth, let's say, and a whole human. So I just find that very interesting to not kind of separate plastic from the whole. So that is one. And the other thing is my partner, Masha, she always says, so I will share from my experience, it's this thing of like, because we spoke now about, okay, we know maybe we want to use less plastic or we want less this or less that, but then other things are cheaper. So that means that it's a mental concept, I should be using less plastic, or I should be not hurting earth or whatever, but it's a very mental concept. So the motivation to be kind of making it change is very low because it's just an idea. So we're not so invested. So from my own experience, I can say in the moment that I actually have an experiential, not a mental learning, so not like you tell me plastic is not good, but an experiential learning of being one, let's say, earth and humans, so we are part of the whole ecosystem. And the moment that we don't understand that with our mind, but that we experience that we are part of nature and part of earth, and whatever we do to it hurts it or her, and can also hurt us. I think that I'm not giving a solution in the sense of like this is how it can look like, but I think that's very important to just kind of like feel why it is that we want to change something and not just do it from the head, you know, because I think that it's not going to really change anything. So it's more on the individual, less on the business, less on the politics. It's more really like the individual kind of like feeling this responsibility, let's say, for ourselves and our planet.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all these really interesting insights and summaries, also what your discussions were about. In advance to this salon, we also thought about how can we turn this conversation into action, and we asked some non-profit organizations who are active in this field to quickly share on how you all can get active in their context. So we invited some really interesting non-profit organizations, Circular Berlin, Cradle to Cradle, and Project Together. And I would like to invite a representative of all of these three organizations to the stage to just briefly introduce them and talk and share how you can actively get involved with them. So maybe we could start with a circular balloon, if someone is around here. Okay, I guess. And then we can continue with cradle to cradle. We have Jana here, who's really happy to share a quick introduction and some words about how you can get involved and active.
Thank you. I'm Jana from Cradle to Cradle NGO, and you already heard the word or the term Cradle to Cradle a lot this evening. So Professor Michael Braungart, he invented the concept, and Anne Lamp, you saw her, and Traceless, she's a former volunteer of our organization. So I'm not going into the details of Cradle to Cradle. If you're interested, come to me and we can talk afterwards, because it's a bit more complex. But so what we're doing is we're trying to spread Cradle to Cradle in society. And we do that by, we educate, we bring people together, and we try to showcase that there are already a lot of existing examples, like Traceless, and that Cradle to Cradle can become reality and is at some point. And we educate by different formats. We have materials for schools, we go into schools, we have workshops, we have different events. We bring people together at our Cradle to Cradle Congress. It's the biggest platform for Cradle to Cradle and circular economy. The next one will be in Berlin in March next year. And yeah, we show also how Cradle to Cradle can become reality and can be scaled through our, we call it laboratory projects. So laboratory because we're not claiming we can get to the 100%, but we want to show what's possible today and what's not, and how can we reach or can we bridge the gap. So we did that last time at Labor Tempelhof when we partnered with die Ärzte and die Toten Hosen at their open air concerts at Tempelhofer Feld. And we tried to showcase what's possible on the concert field. Like we had a lot of different cases, cradle to cradle cases, from cradle to cradle merchandise, textiles in the mobility sector, energy consumption. We also had Traceless on the field with a little fork for the fries tray. And we tried to collect all the findings into political reports. So we showed that's where we wanted to, what we wanted to reach, and that's where we got, and how we can bridge the gap. So that's a report for our political actors. We also wrote like a guidebook for the event industry to show what we did and to bring people to copy what we did and make it even better, to improve it. And we also have like we started an event series, so it's still ongoing. So what can you do with us? You can come to one of our events. You can talk to me, or we still have an exhibition going on in it's Friedrichshain near Boxhagener Platz. So come by, or you are invited to come to our Cradle to Cradle Lab at Landsberger Allee. And yeah, I'm happy to get to know you afterwards, and thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. So make sure to check out Cradle to Cradle. And lastly, we have Project Together. Is there someone from the Project Together team still in the audience? Okay. I guess not, but nevertheless, there's also Circular Berlin and Project Together, where you can also get actively involved and participate and really take this conversation and put it into practice. And by that, I want to hand over to Joerg for the final words.
Well, very final words. So thanks for bearing with us. We realize this has been a rather long and extensive event. We've tried out how to involve the audience a bit more than usual, so that it's not only the panelists that talk for the most part, but also the audience. because often you have as much insight in the audience as you do on the stage, so to speak. Just a few things that stood out for me, comments that were made by our speakers, by our guests. The rules of the game will always define the game. Thanks, Louis, for that comment, which I liked. And I think we do need to change the rules of the game in order to set different frameworks. Behavior change, systems change are keywords that come to mind. The whole design needs to be changed. Wholeness is important. It's not only the mind that needs to be spoken to, but it's the heart, and that's something Anna focuses on greatly. And there's so many aspects that we need to tackle, and this is certainly very complex and complicated as a matter, but I think we've given it a start, and we will follow up with an email, share the websites and contact details of the 3 partner NGOs that we mentioned. And now in like 10 to 20 seconds, a final word by our speakers, just to wrap up. And then we've got until about 11 p.m. to network and converse and pick up another drink at the bar. So thanks a lot for joining us.
I already said my final word before. We need to include the actual costs of this material into the price of it, and we'll be fine.
Yeah, I think we try to look at the economic drivers, we try to look at the political drivers, we try to work with governments, with businesses, bring different people together. We did a big report, again in the context of the treaty, modeling actually what a tax on primary plastics, on non-recycled plastics could look like as a financing mechanism in the context. So we're really, very much share the voices that came here today to try to say we need to change the fundamental incentives in the systems, and we try to bring the right players together, but it really takes all of us to try to tackle it.
I like the idea that we make it more expensive for companies to produce plastic. But what I saw in the last 3 years is that when you have alternatives like Pfandsystem, it works really well. In Germany, we find no bottles anymore. In other countries, in America, for example, I see these cleanup initiatives, and they have a lot of plastic bottles. So maybe we can think in alternatives that makes fun, and where you get something for doing something, and it's nice for children to collect something than to speak just about problems and making this more expensive, and that more expensive. Maybe we can find alternatives that makes also fun.
Yeah, complex problem requires many stakeholders, long way to go. I think fostering collaboration, making that finally happen, that could really help. Thanks.
And Anna brought, if you really want to do something and start a local cleanup day, Anna brought some spare litter pickers and some giveaways, but only to those who are serious in taking action. So thanks a lot, and enjoy the rest of your night.